Uh, all right, so I can start talking now. Okay. Anyway, so Steve has been a holistic healing arts professional for over 30 years. In 1991, he graduated from the Raleigh School of Massotherapy and was introduced to Jin Shin Do, body mind acupressure. For Steve, his studies of JSD began a decades-long fascination with the body as the foundation for growth, change, and the healing process. He became a registered JSD practitioner in 1994, an authorized instructor of JSD in 1997, and a senior authorized instructor in 2004. In addition to private practice, he has also been an instructor at the Cumberland Institute of Holistic Therapies for over 25 years, developing or co-developing several core curriculum and continuing education courses. Receiving a master's degree in marriage and family therapy in 2006, he began working towards his permanent Tennessee LMFT license. From 2007 to early 2008, Steve worked as a holistic body-mind bodywork in Somex from Kent Fisher LPC. Oh, I'm sorry. He worked as a holistic body-mind bodywork professional for the Experiential Healing Center in Memphis. Makes a lot more sense. And at EHC, Steve learned experiential therapy and Somex from Kent Fisher LPC and Michelle Rappaport LPC. After an extensive internship with EHC and earning his TNLL LMFT license in 2012, Steve was a primary care group leader for healing intensives and one of the primary therapists for somatic intensives for 6 years. During his time with EHC, Steve also completed his Somex studies and became a registered Somex practitioner and a certified supervisor, as well as functioning as an assistant or assistant instructor for many Somex classes. Today, Steve has a full-time practice in body-mind therapy, presenting an unusual set of dual licensure skills that makes him a common referral source and a sought-after instructor and supervisor for both bodywork professions and psychotherapy professionals. He also offers witnessed embodiment groups to healing arts practitioners for personal and professional growth. All right, guys, without further ado, Steve, I'll give you the floor.
Thank you, John. I so appreciate that. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking your time. It is an honor to be here. If I would have written a much shorter curriculum vitae if I knew it was going to be read out loud as an introduction. Now that with the 10 minutes that we have left after that, I will be happy to chat with you for a little while. Such an honor to be here. I am hoping, this is a lunch and learn. I see at least one person who is enjoying lunch. I am hoping that for appetizers for our lunch and learn, we can just play. Is that okay for everybody if we just play for a few minutes? All right, cool, let's play. So what I'm going to invite you to do is just to observe your body and to make some movements in your body and to let go of everything else. So the first set of movements would be first to use these muscles up here that are called corrugators. I'll try to get close to the screen so you can see them. If I tighten my corrugators, it kind of focuses my eyes and gives that teacher look. These used to call the teacher muscle sometimes, you know, when you do something, the teacher looks at you with those corrugators. So if you corrugate and then you tighten your jaw, corrugate and tighten your jaw. It's just fun to do that. And then at the same time, you take your hands and you slowly move them into this position and tighten them. Good, and then you can rest them anywhere that you would like, what's comfortable. So hold your fists tight, corrugate, and clench your jaw. And breathe for a few moments while you pick one person that's on screen to just look at. Clenching, corrugating, and tight fists, and just breathe. And just for a few moments, a couple more breaths, notice what it's like in your body, what the experience is. And then slowly, consciously and intentionally open your hands and put your palms up towards the heavens or towards the sky. You can do that this way, or you can just simply rest them in your lap and just rest them in your lap with your palms open. And then let your jaw relax. You can kind of experiment. You can let your jaw relax either with your lips closed and notice that you can rest it, or just gently let your mouth be open. And then just opposite of the corrugation, just open your eyes a couple of times to oppose that action and then let them rest. And with your palms open and your eyes at rest and your jaw at rest, let your breath come into surrounding your heart, into your chest area. And then go back to the same person that you were observing or bringing your attention to. And just breathe for a few moments. Notice what it's like to be observing that person with your palms open, your breath around your heart, your jaw relaxed, and your eyes at ease. Just noticing your breath for a few moments. What it's like to contact the digital image of the person that you're with. And so that's one way we can play. We can play in another way. We can bring our attention to the shoulders. And so if it's okay with you to do so, you might take your shoulders and wear them as earrings. Sometimes they make attractive earrings, especially if you're wearing a pleasant print. You may know somebody or some clients that come into you like this. And just for a few moments, let yourself breathe, just with your movement, just with your shoulders at your ears. Feel your breath, and again, go back to just making a connection with one person there in front of you. And gather the sensations and the qualities of what it's like to breathe with your shoulders attached to your ears. And then the next time that you exhale, just let them go. And then kind of wiggle them a little bit, because they can wiggle, shoulders wiggle. And then let your shoulders go back and your chest come forward. Almost like you are gently trying to touch your shoulders together in the back. Just notice how the quality of your breath is when you hold that. It's maybe familiar or unfamiliar, and then breathe that for a few moments while again you make contact with a person. Just noticing what it's like to breathe that. I almost can't not corrugate when I do that personally. Just notice your body and your breath with your shoulders held back, your chest stuck out. And then as you exhale, let that go. And then just for one more play as an appetizer, and then you can get to lunch if you have it, if you'd like. I won't bother you much anymore for your body. You can let your shoulders wrap in almost like they're trying to touch in the front, slumping or rounding towards the front. Again, just noticing, does this feel familiar at all or not familiar? And as you hold them there, let your body breathe. Noticing what it's like to breathe in that position, that posture. And then again, letting your eyes make contact with another human digital representation. And noticing what it's like to be in connection or imagine a connection there with that. And then as you exhale, you can let that go. And then just for fun, let your shoulders move a little bit. And sometimes it can be helpful if you take an inhalation, a breath in, and you raise your arms, and as you exhale, just let them drop. What is amazing about letting them drop, not always easy to do in a chair, is that your shoulders actually know how to rest on your rib cage. They actually know how to do that, and this movement can help that. And just check out what it's like to now breathe and make contact with a person with your shoulders just gently resting on your rib cage, letting the breath move in and out. So you can just gather your experiences from that little experiment. All we did was change the posture of our body. We didn't talk about feelings. We didn't talk about history. We didn't talk about the future or relationships. Just change the posture of our body. I am losing my earbud here. My earbud is not my buddy when it falls out of my head. What I would love to do is share just a couple of experiences from yesterday. I checked out with some people about what they might like to hear if they came to a talk like this. And people that I know said, I'm guessing people have no idea what actually happens in a session with what you do. And so I thought I might just describe, just yesterday, I taught for 4 hours yesterday, so I just had 3 clients. And I had one A+ client and one not so A+ client. You ever notice when you go to seminars and people present cases, mostly it's the A+ clients, right? Like this client received this modality and this worked perfectly, and that's the way it goes. So I'd love to share a little bit about an A+ client yesterday, someone I've been working with for maybe 1.5 years, and is a grandfather and a father and a spiritual professional. And his son has cut off relationships with him. They went through a family divorce when the son was 8 or 9. There is alcoholism in the family. Then the family separated, and the son actually flew back and forth every other weekend from family to family. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff. And yesterday, in the last few months, the son has cut off, is now 31, is engaged, and has cut off all relationships with my client. And so we've been working with that. And yesterday, what he came to realize is that he felt that he had cut off, had been blocking. Maybe there is something that he could be doing, or maybe he's going to get invited to the wedding, maybe he isn't, and that he felt cut off, and maybe he was blocking. And when he said that, he had his hands clasped in front of him like this. And he said, I can even feel that through my shoulders and arms, the way I hold my hands this way. And so I asked him to be present with that and to notice what other parts of his body, and he identified his jaw. And what he said was, gosh, I wish that I could be more open. I really wish I could be more open, but it just feels like I need to be blocking. And so I asked him if he would be willing to gently and slowly. I actually, sorry, I'm also experiential. So I put his son in a chair. He can do empty chair work, and just have his son actually happen to be Paddington Bear, who is often in my office. And so I asked him to go inside to feel all of that, and inside his body, without paying attention to the chair, to just slowly open his palms, like we just did a little bit, to go from the clenched position to open palms. I asked him if he would be willing to relax his shoulders. I asked him if he'd be willing to notice if his jaw could open. And again, A+ client, right? This is what happens sometimes. He smiled, and so I asked him about the smile. And he said, if I could know in every moment that God truly loved me wholly and completely, I could be open with my son. And so I just asked him to hold that posture and to feel that and to breathe that and to fully engage with that. And then to gently gaze back over towards his son. And when he did that, he felt a great relief, and then felt he was angry. And so that moved into some work with anger. And I asked him to acknowledge the anger and to feel the anger in his body. So we did what we did earlier, which was to clench his fists, going back to clenching the fists, to tightening the shoulders, tightening the jaw, tightening the eyes. And we did just a little piece on accepting how he could be hurt as well. That's what he felt in his heart, was heart hurt when he felt the anger. And then, and here's the body piece, he said, I'm imagining the Sufi dancers. I see them all the time. They have one hand up and one hand down while they twirl in a dervish. And they are receiving from the heavens so that they can let go of the bitterness and anger of the daily stuff. And so I said, would you like to dance? A+ client says, yes, of course I would, instead of, no way, I ain't doing that. Go away. A+ client gets up, we danced together. 67-year-old father danced together, and as he danced, he began to smile, and when he sat down, his whole body was at ease. And he could then gaze at his son with openness and an acknowledgement of how much hurt was on both sides. And what he said was, I see the little boy in him, and I can love his wounded self. So that is one example. A+ client working with the body, acknowledging that the body is the source of our being and can lead us to emotional regulation, emotional resolution, and relational peace. And then I will share my last client, who is 39 weeks pregnant, about to be a mom for the first time, had her parents come down to her house, felt how yucky and uncomfortable that was, and 3 times when I asked her how she could assist herself knowing her parents would be coming back, she went, I just need space. And so I asked her to pay attention to that. And after about 10 or 15 seconds, 3 times in a row, when I asked her to pay attention to that, the need for space, her brain would start talking to me about the relationships and what had happened in the past and what she was afraid of in the future. And I would listen and then bring her back to this. And then 15 seconds later, she would talk about what she imagined in the future and what she imagined in the past and the relationships. And then I would bring her back to this. And we went through that cycle. And so I did other kinds of therapy. And we talked about a lot of different ways that she could take care of herself. And she was not willing to be in that process. So that is a couple of, that's just from yesterday, just examples. A+ client, when things work and it all resolves, all things go well. Another client who is not quite sure they want to go there with me. So that's a couple of examples of what I do. I'm gonna put up a screen sharing for a moment. And if I can figure out how to do that. Here comes a screen share, there it is. What I find in my general practice is that I am mixing something called body focusing. Some of you may be familiar with Eugene Gendlin in the 70s and focusing. Some of you may be familiar with somatic experiencing, and every time Peter Levine gets an award or writes a foreword, he often says, I am standing on the shoulders of Eugene Gendlin and his seminal work in focusing. So that's one part of what I do. It brings mindful presence and it honors that the body always tells the truth. And it honors that if I pay attention to any single thing with my full being, it will change. And the body wants resolution. Our internal authentic self wants change and resolution. The next thing that I work with all the time is Wilhelm Reich's segmental theory. Armoring is a term that we throw around and banter. Anyone that gets familiar with body work or body mind work will learn the term armoring. To the best of my knowledge, Wilhelm Reich in the 30s, 40s, and 50s coined the phrase armoring. And it is about recognizing the postural habits that we utilize to live our lives in the way in which we live it. And that ability to help a client move in and out of their postural habits or become aware of their postural habits is a lot of what I attend to. I also have done 30 years of study of classical acutheory and Taoist philosophy. That thing under there says yin yang. There's the symbol, the yin yang symbol with the 2 paisleys. That is the foundation of all acupuncture, acupressure, Taoist philosophy, martial arts, school of thought, and many more things. And then Iona Teagarden created Jinshindo. I have that, I will say that again later. And she created, based on that classic acupressure theory, and a theory of emotional regulation, which we calls the emotional kaleidoscope. And I spend lots of time teaching my clients that emotions, the extreme emotions, are a natural life-saving part of life, and that they are there to help us find resolution with our response to life. And we can talk about that a little bit. And then finally, Somex is Kent Fisher and Michelle Rappaport Moore. They combined somatic transformation, which is an offshoot of Peter Levine, Sharon Stanley's work. And they realized that their focus in working experientially with addicts and adult children for 25 years, that those people, and maybe you have some of this experience as well, if you're working with someone with a significant amount of trauma, or just coming sober, or having a lot of adult child issues, and you simply ask them what is it like in their body, and you go to access a body experience. Most folks with complex PTSD or getting sober will say, I have no idea what's happening there. And if I possibly can get access to it, it is so intolerable that we can't stay there. So Somex is a fantastic way of moving into relationship and finding embodiment with folks either have complex PTSD or are working from an adult child or an addiction background, abuse or trauma background. All right, that was a lot of stuff. I wrote down on my piece of paper to say at this moment that fortunately I have organized an intense and very thorough PowerPoint presentation, so that for the next 35 minutes, I will easily and effortlessly teach you all you need to know about all those modalities, and you'll just go out and do them. That's my joke. That's a laughing joke. I would love to either do one of the following thing: take questions, thoughts, comments, complaints, if there's something out of the experience that you'd like to share, or any of those things that I mentioned that you'd like more information, or what was happening with the clients. Yes, there is a question, please. There's questions. If you will, there is Yvonne, thank you. If you're willing to type a question into the book, we can, into the chat room, we can just take them one at a time. Yvonne says, if the client has been ready to explore, quote, I just need space. How might you have, if the client had been ready to explore, how might you have worked with that? That is a lovely question. And I have this really cool screen share thing to show you about that. That's one of my very favorite postures, this posture, one of my very favorite postures. If you've done training in somatic work, you know that that's a basic foundational survival skill. If you do a little bit of training in acupressure theory, you will find, let me see if I can screen share this, that there is a flow of energy, or what might be called a fascial track, which is the way the connective tissue runs through your body. And in acupressure theory, it's called the large intestine meridian. And so I have made a big black dark line in the large intestine meridian. And in acupressure theory, there is both the internal function of the organ, and then there is a surface flow that is related to all the functioning of that organ and all its related associations. So who cares? Why we care about that is if you just look at that diagram and see that it runs up the very muscled parts of the forearm, and up the muscled parts of the side of the arm, and through the heavy muscled parts in the shoulders, and through the muscled parts of the jaw, and to the nose. What we can see, and I will take that, if you would like anything that I show and you know how to make screenshots, please feel free to do screenshots. I'm going to bounce back and forth. So if you will just sort of take a look at that, and then I'll come back to all of you here. If you were to take your hands and push, and in this case, like the client was pushing, making space for herself, if you push with that, you can feel the energy going through those muscles. And if I, as a practitioner, know that those muscles are for doing what the large intestine does, which is to hold away, hold in, or hold on, in this case, hold away, then I can let the client really explore that and feel the energy of that. And in a perfect world, the expression of that, I could even get up against her hands and let her push. In a perfect world, the expression of that would teach her what she wants or needs, or let her feel the energy that she has the capacity to do it. How might have you worked with that? So I would either press up against her, or I would let her explore that. And I might oscillate, like let it down. Imagine your parents there, what that's like. Let it up and push. And what will emerge based on Reichian theory, segmental theory, and armoring is every time in her life where she did not have the space and she needed to, and her body needed to express that, she might have a memory pop up. And we could work with that memory and help her do what she needed to do at that time, which would then renegotiate that so she could do it in the present moment. Or it would get her in touch. And again, this is my experience, is that if I give the space to the client and I ask them to really pay attention to that and what it's doing, then the words and the action and the energy will emerge on its own. And I don't need to tell them what to do. They will find it emerging on their own, or they will run up against their own layers of armoring where they could not or will not express that. And we can work with that and renegotiate. I hope that that answers the question.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next question is, would love to hear examples. Linda, was that the example you were hoping to hear? You can unmute, perhaps. I can't hear you.
Sorry. When you were talking about the examples of theoretical orientations and you got down to the SOMEC and you talked about that specifically related to very traumatized people who don't want to go into their bodies at all.
Yes, I would love to give you an example. So the traditional somatic work, as it's taught, Peter Levine, although I've heard that Peter Levine is now using experiential props and things like that. Traditional somatic work says, I need to have an embodied experience, or I need to access my body. The PTSD response, or complex PTSD, in my opinion, is specifically cutting off our experience of the body because the sensations and experiences are too overwhelming. Mm-hmm. So what I would do, simply as an example, is to find something outside that is at all pleasant. And that can be a flight of imagination. Many of you that do EMDR or other trauma work, you have a practice of safe space. And a simple example of flight of imagination is to ask the client, and many clients with complex PTSD have no safety whatsoever, right? That's the basis. We want to form safety if at all possible. So I will often tell those folks, the bad news is you have no safety to rely on, which is how most people recover from trauma, because there was safety and you remember it. You may not have any experience of safety, so the bad news is you have nothing to rely on. The good news is, as you are today as an adult, you get to figure out what's safe for you now. And then we either do a flight of imagination into safety and immerse them into the sensations of safety that they would have, what they would see, what they would feel, what they would hear, what they would feel texturally, what would be around them, what the surroundings are going to be like, what the environment. And because the unconscious mind really, truly, completely does not know the difference between whether I'm sitting on the couch or whether I'm laying on the beach, in the perfect beach with the perfect waves, with the perfect seagull sounds, the neurological system will access that in some way. And slowly, gently, individually with each client, we find a way where they can begin to embody what they can access. So that is one way to do that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
You are so very welcome. I'm glad to answer any questions. Would love to hear examples of the SOMEX process used with very traumatized clients. That is certainly one way to do that. If I'm not going to do a flight of imagination, I will utilize unconscious movement or posture. Very often people will, while they're on your couch, while they're in your chair and they are not in their body will do things to comfort them that they don't even know about, right? They will stroke their own hair, or they will rub their fingers. I have one client that, you can't see this. If this was my knee, she just gently moves her hand around her knee. And what I'm looking for is anything that's pleasant. Several clients that I've worked with have nothing that is pleasant, that in their conscious awareness. But if we gently bring awareness to what they are actually doing, whether that's moving their feet, whether that's tightening their legs, whether that is stroking their hair, what they find if we pay attention to it is that it is their body trying to comfort them. And all we need is one little tiny place where there can be awareness that their body is actually trying to help them. Because for so many of us, our bodies were dangerous, dangerous places. Whether that's because there's too many feelings, or whether that's because of self-harm, or whether it's just simply intolerable or because of deep shame. And what we're looking for over and over again is any little tiny place where it's safe to take action or comfort or be present. That is lovely. Next question is, I noticed during the clench and face brows jaw, my heart started to beat faster. Yay, good for you. That is absolutely true. Our heart responds to everything that's going on, right? And if you were a client and you were able to contact that, we could notice what it's like when your heart beats faster, if it reminded you of anything, if it was familiar or unfamiliar. Or we could oscillate between the clenching of the jaw that makes the heartbeat faster if it's uncomfortable, and anything that is comforting or soothing or resourcing, so that you could consciously be empowered to be through that. Yes, that is, I'm going to utilize that for a moment. I'm going to try one more screen share. Let's try one more screen share here. This is an example of one of the lands or slices of life in the acupressure theory. If you'll notice at the top, it says heart, shen, small intestine. And so this is the acupressure way of understanding the theory of the heart. And what do I want to say about that? What I will say is that each of the organs has a primary synergic emotion in this case, and we even use this in our culture, right? Like when I feel okay, when I feel at ease, my heart is warm, my heart is at ease. When I want to do something that is joyful for me, I'm following my heart. Right? When I feel compassion for somebody, I am feeling heart warm towards them, or they touched my heart. And what we were talking about was the heart starts to race. Each of our organs, and this is kind of woo-woo, so I'll just say that out loud. Each of our organs, and I'm going to leave the screen share up for a moment. Each of our organs, like the rest of our nervous system, is monitoring our environment at all times. And in acupressure theory, the heart is associated with the empress or the emperor, the king of the castle. It is our primary vital organ. And anytime there's stress in the kingdom, the heart will respond to that. And so if we can learn, here's the mindfulness part, here's the attention part. If we can learn to identify it when our heart is stressed, and we can bring soothing and comfort to it, then we can soothe and comfort the organ. And when What the acupressure texts say is that when the king is strong and joyful, the kingdom is strong and joyful. All right. And what we find with all of our clients, what I find with my clients, is that we are stressed out by relationships, and the fire element and the heart itself is all about relationships. And so the heart is monitoring relationships all the time. And when we can be at ease, at peace, knowing our sovereignty, then our heart can be relaxed. This is, that's not exactly as tangible and specific as I wanted that to be, but I wanted to also show you an example of how I might use acupressure theory. When the heart is stressed out, it is generally because I cannot conceive that my kingdom exists this way. And so we want to open a space where it is possible to feel the heart. I will give an example of that. About 3 weeks ago, working with a client, and her daughter just went to school for the first time after 8 years of homeschool. She went to school for the first time that she had major homework assignments. Daughter has some learning difficulties, mostly from ADHD and focus issues. The mom spent 6 hours a night trying to help her daughter do 2 hours of homework for 2 weeks, and felt extremely stressed and came in very agitated, talking about relationships and how she didn't know how to be in a relationship with her daughter and with the school. And in the midst of all of the stress, her arm was up and her fingers touched her heart. Relationship stress stresses our heart. And so in the midst of all that stress, I just paused her and asked her if she would notice how gentle her hand came and her fingers were touching her heart. Again, A+ client. And she was willing to do that. And what she found was that her fingers were trying to comfort the pain that was in the back of her heart. And so instead of trying to solve all of her problems with her daughter and solve her history and solve the future, I just simply asked her to be in touch with the pain. She trusts me, we've done this work before. And then I asked her if she would be willing to let the pain have sound. And while she touched her heart, she let out, I don't know, 6 or 8 or 10 sounds, something like that, that got bigger or smaller. And when it was complete and she had cried a bunch, she had a completely different perspective on how she could be with her daughter, and the recognition of how much pain it was causing her to not know a solution. When she could feel deeply and authentically know what was happening in her heart, instead of talking about the anxiety of that, she was able to then say, I'm angry now, but I am angry in a good way. One of my favorite sayings with clients is, if your anger was not at other people but for you, what would the energy of anger be asking for you? Right. And she said, I'm angry in a really good way because I feel the energy to know how much this is hurting me and my daughter, and I feel the energy to do what was necessary. And when she came in, all she could feel was the exhaustion and the unsolvability of the problem. But simply being able to witness the pain that was behind her heart, give it voice, give it expression, give it space, she could return with a softer heart, an easier heart that had compassion for how much hurt it was and how difficult it was, and a willingness to utilize the energy of anger, which is for action, which is for change, which is for responding, and utilize that in a good way, constructive way. So that's an example of how to treat the heart directly and to feel the body's experience, and that in itself does the work of resolving the anxiety and the difficulties. that I don't have to solve that, and the client doesn't necessarily have to know how to solve that. The goal is to have direct experience to the truth of it and let the body lead us authentically. Hopefully that was useful in some way. I noticed, what are some great somatic exercises for those coming out of addiction? What a great question. I'm sure there are so many books that could be written on that. Great somatic exercises for those coming out of addiction. Anything that will help them find their body to be an inhabitable place. And so I have a list of what are of categories of resources. That's a familiar term. All the somatic processes use the term resource now. Anything that will be calming and soothing to my nervous system, anything that will get me out of my head and into my body. And so I don't know what it's going to be. My exercise with them is for them to list. What are the sounds they love? What are the music they love? What is the smells they love? What are the tastes they love? What are the activities that they love? Do they like to stretch? Do they like to wiggle? Do they like to dance? Do they like formal movement like yoga or meditation or Tai Chi? And to engage them with those things so that they can, and literally somatic exercise to me means embodied process. So anything that has to do with the senses, or even a flight of imagination where it would be okay to be in the senses. That's the primary exercise I use for those folks. Somatic exercises. And then I will listen, we were talking just before the thing about that there may be a small number of participants today because generally it's a small category of people that make the body the primary focus of therapy. So less people are interested in it. I heard Bessel van der Kolk a few years ago, who wrote Body Keeps the Score and is one of the famous somatic psychotherapy gurus. He was talking to 200 psychotherapists as a keynote speaker. And he said to them, if you have a client with complex PTSD and you are talking to them, stop it. Play with them, move with them, have them go to a theater, have them take yoga or Tai Chi. Stop talking to them. And I happened to be there by myself, so I walked out in the hall on a break, and that is pretty insulting when you tell a bunch of talk therapists in a room to stop talking to their clients. That really made some waves. So the primary somatic exercises are stop talking about things that are intolerable, and start to live. Start to be present. And that's usually pretty darn uncomfortable. Take any addict and they are really uncomfortable in their body. If they have any adult child issues, they don't know how to play, they don't know how to take care of themselves. And so unfortunately, my phrase that comes to mind is good luck with that. And any of you that I have worked with many people that have complex PTSD, and the process is slow. And yet I have several clients who presented with complex PTSD who have made such amazing progress by a willingness to find ways to make their experience tolerable. Another A+ client started with, when we first got to her body, the primary experience was numbness, nothing. And you might have that experience. Ask somebody what their experience in their body. They will say, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know what you're talking about. And so we used a flight of imagination to create safety. She said, that's the first time I ever felt safe in my life. Thank you. That was enough to keep her coming back through all the craziness. And then she decided she would take all the SE classes and go through somatic experiencing, and did 3 years of her own SE training, as well as lots of yoga, lots of play. And today, when we work together, she can be in her body and what comes up. And it is possible. And as my friends Kent and Michelle would say, if we told our clients with complex PTSD or lots of family addiction and mental illness that it would be 3 to 5 years of hard work until they felt comfortable in their lives, they'd never come back. So we don't tell them. I wish that I had a better answer for that. Rebecca, does that help? Is that what was useful for you? I don't.
Yeah, sorry, I'm hardcore momming today, so I'm a little incognito. Yeah, that was extremely helpful, especially just the normalizing of how slow the process can go and how hard that can be for people. I tend to find that the hardest part for myself as a clinician to sit with, just the
Yes.
recognizing of, oh, that 3 to 5 years can feel like a really long time sometimes. So
Yeah.
I just appreciate you normalizing that and the invitations that you offered in these exercises. Thank you.
You are welcome. Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, it is difficult for most clinicians when I teach body workers and psychotherapists how to be present with the body. It is, the primary difficulty is I get into therapy so I can help people solve their problems, and this is not solving their problems. Or I get into therapy because I want to focus on the problems so they can get better, and this is not focusing on the problems. And maybe like you, when the whole happiness therapy came out, right? Lots of books for a little while, and like, let's just focus on being happy. And I thought, no, we can't focus on being happy. I can't be happy. That's not right. What about all the problems? And then at the same time, I think to myself often, stop focusing on the problem. It's overwhelming. It's intolerable. They don't have a solution for it. Help them feel safe. Help them feel comfortable, help them have an embodied experience of life right now, right today, not in the past where the problems were, not in the future where the problems were, where the problems are going to continue to be, but where is a safe place to be right now and right here. And that itself is the active force in shifting. And that's really hard for people who are taught to go at the problem, who are taught to focus on the problem, and the clients want to focus on the problem, right? Our clients want to keep focusing on the problems. And boy, do I focus on problems. Don't let me get you wrong. I do not deny the problems. And we keep coming back to, can I be in my body right now? Can I be present with what's happening? And if not, let's take some time to find somewhere where I can be, and then look at the problem from far away, or re-engage with the problem with a new perspective. And that perspective is not my perspective. That perspective is their internal experience. That is the end of the questions. I will wait and see if there's any more questions based on that. Well, there are no more questions, so let's play for a moment. I'm going to screen share again. I'm so grateful for at least a modicum of modern technology usability. We're going till 1, so let me do one thing really quick here. Let's get to this. So we'll just do a quick Wilhelm Reich piece. 3 layers of armoring. Anytime your client can identify tension, there can be a lot of usefulness in helping them get aware of the tension, or what the somatic people would call a fixed movement pattern, or a fixed pattern of holding. Wilhelm Reich 60 years ago just simply called it armoring. He said very simply, everyone has tension. It is natural for tension to arise in the body. The problem is not tension. The problem is when there is tension that will not go away. And that chronic tension over time becomes armoring, and it creates rigidity. And so any of those positions that we were in earlier with the shoulders or with the jaw clenched, you might imagine what it would be like, instead of just holding it for the 2 minutes that we held it, to hold it for 2 hours, or 2 days, or 2 months, or 2 years, or 20 years. And essentially what Reich said is, if I clench my jaw every time I want to cry, And I live in a traditional Southern household where I learned that if I don't stop crying, I will be given something to cry about. Anybody raised on that one? I didn't even know that existed till I moved to the South, but apparently that's, and then people told me they were raised on it in the North. If I learn that crying is going to make it worse and I will have much more pain, then I will learn to tighten my neck muscles and my jaw muscles in order to squelch the sobbing. And I will learn to fixate my eyes and hold the tears in. Just recently worked with a client who said, I learned to cry out of only one eye because the other eye faced a parent and I was in the passenger seat. And so if I just cried out of this eye, they couldn't see it, and this one just held. Right? So Reich says there's 3 layers of armoring. And so anytime we pay attention to the tension, which is what I do a lot in my practice, we will run into everyday goo, which is every time I feel sad about something or I resist something, I will do, or any emotion, and I want to hold in my voice, I will do the same thing. So the fight that I had with my mother, brother, sister, father, co-worker, etc., the discomfort I had in traffic will come and layer on the same. Underneath that, if I hold it and then I relax it or I become aware, is all the layers of unexpressed, avoided, denied, repressed emotions, attitudes, or actions. Right? That's really good for us psychotherapists, because most of us psychotherapists learn and operate out of the idea that everything that we learned in our training and our history is why we do what we do now. And our job is to help the client bring the unconscious conscious, right? All of the internal motivations, all of the reasons they do stuff because of the way they related to their mom or because of the way they learned to relate in their school or in relationships. We want to bring that unconscious conscious. And Reich says every single bit of it is in our tissues and displays itself every moment of every day. And so by paying attention to it, again, we don't have to know the story. We don't have to have them tell us the story. We don't have to be magicians. Some of you are amazing magicians. I witness that all the time. You talk to someone for an hour and you're like, well, the reason that you are in this trouble is because when you were 7, your mother said that. And she said that a lot when you were 7. That describes it. I would much rather go to their body and have them discover the layers and layers of avoid, denied, and repressed stuff that they did when their mother told them that, and they learned to hold their feelings or their truth in a particular way. I'd much rather have them discover that on their own than tell them about it. People told me about it. I don't know about you, but I had a bunch of therapy when I was a kid, and I got a lot of information about why I was screwed up, why I was suicidal, why I was depressed, why I was anxious, why I was an addict. And none of it changed anything until I got on someone's table and they pushed on my body and made me feel why I was the way I was. And I could discover it for myself. I was a lousy therapy client. And so I needed to attend to my body, which is probably why I've been doing this for 30 years. Underneath that, bunches of layers, is the free child, which is delightful when it gets there in the office. Maybe you have those experiences, right? When there's some wonderful stuff that happens and the free child emerges and everybody rejoices because the free child is there. And then what Wilhelm Reich also said is it's impossible to live free child every moment of every day. So what we want to do is have the regular tension that arises to be in relationship, to be parents, to be workers, to do our normal life, and then be able to let it go so that we can fully participate in free child. And if you think about children, they wiggle and move and make sounds and play and discover and are wonderfully delighted by things. And so if we can, what Wilhelm Reich said is if we can let go of those habits, we can spontaneously remember what is originally there. All right, I'm noticing that it's 12:56. Are you all good if I go right up to 1 o'clock, or is that all right with you? Yes, cool, I'm going. So I'm going back to this. One other aspect of that idea that the emotions are, or that the attitudes, behaviors, and emotions, and I could talk about that all day, is the feelings. And I use a lot of this work to help people regulate feelings, right? The phrase is emotional sobriety or emotional regulation. The whole somatic world is now talking about nervous system regulation. There's a whole separate world of emotional sobriety or emotional regulation. And for me, it has been supremely useful to remember that the word emote literally means to move outward. And that that's what emotions are for. Things that are intolerable or that we don't know how to respond to or that require energy. Anything that requires energy to respond to, the energy moves out of our organs and into our system and out into the world. So that's been really helpful because most people who are grieving grieve this way. And that's not grief. Grief is, it is a giant movement of energy in and out of the lungs because the lungs are the very organ that helps us let go and come and be present with what actually is every moment of every day. And so grief, which is detaching from what we have lost and moving from the past into the present, is a great generation of energy that literally gulps in present energy, lets go of attachment to the old stuff. That's grief, right? And so that's energy in motion. And that is the next thing it says there is emotion, energy in motion. Each of the organs, this is acupressure theory again, each of the organs puts copious amounts of energy out. So in order to stop that, we already talked about if I cannot grieve, I will use my jaw, I will use my neck, I will also use my shoulders. I will also use my diaphragm. In order to stop, I will use muscular tension, and that will be conscious or unconscious. 12:58, last thing I'll share is about me. When I went to bodywork school, I found out that I was a rock. People would touch my body and say, oh my gosh, you're just like a rock. I had no idea because that was normal for me. What I discovered was that I was really, really angry. However, anybody who knew me would have said, that's the nicest guy I've ever met. What I learned was that anger was normal, but there was no appropriate place for that. I don't know if anybody learned that, right? There was always the phrase like there's an appropriate place for your anger, or it's okay to be angry, but there was never an appropriate place. Or if the anger came out, it was not okay. So I learned I will put all the anger away. And by the time I was 23 and in massage school, I didn't even know I was angry until I got body work and all this rage started pouring out of me. And it was the best thing that I could ever have experienced, and it kept coming out, and I had a lot of stuff to be angry at. Because I could not feel my anger, I also could not feel my joy. My spouse laughs all the time because when she met me, I would say funny things and I would laugh and it would come like this. Because I had learned that that was funny, people thought it was funny, but there was no contact with the joy. As much as I squeezed off anger and my grief, I also squeezed off my joy. So there is this crazy idea. This is the last thing I'll share. Here's, if you want to take a screenshot of this, you are welcome to. Here's some resources. The second one down is Iona Teagarden's book, The Joy of Feeling, which describes all of the psychological aspects of acupressure theory. And you are, what she said is that feelings are like a lens, right? If I can't feel my anger, I also can't feel my joy. If I can't feel my sadness, also can't feel my gladness. And that was true for me. I recognize it's 1 o'clock. It's such a short time. I am so grateful for you all to come and be willing to listen to what I have to say. I'm very honored by that, and I really appreciate it. There are some, if you want to take a screenshot of that, there are some resources.
I don't know.
That you can text me, you can contact me, and if you want to take a screenshot of this, I'm going to, I don't even know if this is okay for me to do, I never asked. You can take a screenshot of that. I am going to do 9 hours on the emotional kaleidoscope and emotional regulation from an acupressure energetic perspective. And I teach clients about that every single day, and it helps because our emotional regulation and education around emotions, there was emotional quotient that came out a long time ago. Much of our culture has a very small emotional quotient, and it really helps people understand their emotions and learn to regulate them. So there is that information if you'd like to do that, or you can contact me. There are 2 new messages down there. Thank you so much. Very interesting. Yes. So thank you all very much for taking your time.
Thank you. Thank
Yay.
you.
Steve, that was wonderful.